The reason that nice guys finish last, but in the context of nice in relationship, when it's contrived, when it's manipulative, is because you can't trust it. So unconsciously, it's actually very unattractive. It's unattractive because it comes with this like, I need you to validate who I am and my worth, and that's why I'm doing all these things. And if you reject me, well, you better watch out. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mark Groves podcast. Today I want to talk to you about the shadow side of goodness and the shadow side of goodness on an interpersonal level, and how goodness, kindness, niceness, all these things can have a real dark side to them. And the hard part about recognizing the dark side of these behaviors, especially within ourselves, is they masquerade as positive, right? They masquerade as being about bringing positivity to the world and light and helping everyone heal. And I'm just like, I work hard at that and I just love everybody all out. I do so much for everybody. And yet it can be a real shadow. It can be a real darkness. I want to contextualize that because, of course, you might identify as someone who is nice. And there's nothing wrong with being nice. But there's the recognition that kindness sometimes is contrived. Kindness sometimes is manipulative. So I'm going to speak both to being the person who weaponizes goodness and kindness, and also the person who is in relationship with those people, that type of person, and might extract from that type of person because that's the shadow that meets that shadow. And also why sometimes when someone is being really nice to you and wants to do something for you and give something to you, that you might actually feel triggered by it, that you might actually not trust them. And what can end up happening is you're like, what's wrong with me that I don't want this? What's wrong with me that I can't receive this from them? Why am I so broken that I can't actually accept this kind, generous thing that they're doing? They love me, and here I am not being able to receive their love. And it's because on a much deeper level, on a nervous system level, on an unconscious level, you can feel that it's not free. You can feel that it's manipulative. You can feel that there's a secret contract being created with you, and it's masquerading as, let me take care of everything. Let me pay for that. Let me support you through this. The reason that is a secret contract is because for the person who is doing that, there is a desire to keep the other person close. The goodness is about being so valuable that people won't leave us. The niceness is about when they notice how good I am, all the things I give up, they can't leave. Because what will their life be like without me? Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're someone who has a lot of resentment, you tend to be a people pleaser, you tend to chase projects, you tend to date people who always have a problem, who need some sort of fixing, some sort of help. They're fresh out of relationships. They're maybe in recovery programs, or they're addicts of some kind. That they're sex addicts, they're serial cheaters, but not with you. They're constantly navigating challenges, but they're never becoming adults themselves because someone is always saving them from their ability to save themselves. So they never get to figure out that they need to show up for themselves. And so one way that they keep people close is by always having problems, by always needing something to solve, by always being a fuck up, by always having something, some sort of dysfunction, some sort of challenge, some sort of issue that in order for someone else to feel close to them, unconsciously they create issues. And I see this a lot where a couple doesn't know how to orient to each other from health. They don't know how to orient to each other from well-being. When one is sick, the other takes care of them. And as soon as the sick one gets better, the other one gets sick. As soon as one person is navigating the problem, and you see this with addicts, an addict gets sober, and the person who is trying to help them, support them, doesn't have a job anymore. And so they're forced to face themselves. That's why it looks like the addict is the one who needs to go to therapy and get their poop in a group. But it's actually, so does the person who continues to enable. So does the person who continues to stay in a relationship with someone who continues to break their word, who continues to lie, who continues to manipulate. And just like name the way that behavior orients to something. It doesn't have to be a drug. It could be lots of things. And so the shadow side of that goodness, where we're the one pursuing and wanting them to change and wanting them to grow, there's a rewounding that's occurring. That's like, when I'm finally enough, when I finally do enough, you'll change. But the unconscious part is that if they change, your wound gets healed. That's the thing. So it's like, you might continue to look for problems. You might connect through criticism. You might never want them to actually win, because to actually win requires you to orient a relationship differently, to orient from health. So the outside experience, which is being in a relationship with someone that you're trying to help heal, at some point, and this is of course what leads to the healing of addicts too, is that the people enabling them go, no more. No longer am I going to participate in this system. Now look, on the basis of when we think of like people pleasing, right? And there's a lot of experience of resentment. That's why resentment is one of the most powerful reflections of an emotion you have, because it is saying that you need a boundary there, because you are prioritizing something or someone over you. And so there's valuable information when you resent somebody in your life. There's valuable information because it's saying, hey, you don't matter as much as they matter. You're putting them ahead of you. And then you're frustrated that they don't notice that how much you're doing, how much you're showing up. And so we use the resentment as an unconscious weapon against them. We hold it over them. And that's why when we look at the behavior of niceness, which of course kindness is essential in a relationship. Generosity is essential in a relationship. We just have to be able to label and name when we are unconsciously creating contracts that actually are about manipulating the other person. So we think about that saying, nice guys finish last. And the reason that nice guys finish last is that their niceness is contrived. It's bullshit. It's fake. It's like just so that you think they're better than other guys. I had that exact syndrome. I'm going to prove, because I was taught in the 80s and 90s, I think it's worse today, that men are bad, men are rapists, men are murderers, men are bad. So I'm not going to be like other men. I'm not going to be like those men who lie, who cheat, who are not kind to you. I'm going to be so kind so that you notice how kind I am, so that I seem like a more appealing mate. God Sod calls it sneaky fucker syndrome, where you're like creating closeness through friendship and things like that, and then you try to switch in. The reason that nice guys finish last, but in the context of nice in relationship, when it's contrived, when it's manipulative, is because you can't trust it. So unconsciously, it's actually very unattractive. It's unattractive because it comes with this like, I need you to validate who I am and my worth. And that's why I'm doing all these things. And if you reject me, well, you better watch out. If you do not receive what I'm giving, or at some point you call out that you feel manipulated, you feel like it comes with conditions that you weren't told about, you better watch out, because I'll come for you. I'll tell you all about how you don't appreciate things, how you always choose shitty people, you're drawn to this type of person, you don't recognize love when it shows up. Healing this shadow is so powerful for the person who is the overfunctioner, the overgiver, the manipulator, because deep in the unconscious part of that pattern of that behavior is that you don't believe you're valuable just as you are. That you learned somewhere in your childhood, and that's why it requires grief, it requires presence, it requires compassion. I might be ferocious about the calling forward of it because I want you to move through and heal and actually connect in a way where you're not trying to hustle for your worth, where you're not trying to try to figure out everyone else's needs and orient around everybody else, where your kindness is actually genuine, where you get access to that. Because if you don't trust your own generosity, because you know on a deep level you're actually using it as a way to keep people close, then you won't trust other people's generosity. And you're not actually present, because what's happening is your mind is always trying to be vigilant and guess what someone else needs, to always try to prepare for or know what someone's need is before they do, and even create needs they didn't even know they have or don't actually have. And so you're never actually able to be in the present moment, because everything is going through a filter of who you think you need to be in order to maintain feeling loved and connected to someone. So at the basis of your relationship experience is actually not a genuine experience where you feel love for who you actually are, because there's a fear of actually presenting who you actually are to people. And that is a learned behavior. That's why it requires compassion, that somewhere you learned it wasn't safe to be you. Somewhere you learned that your value was in predicting other people's needs and in only being valuable through what value you could bring to someone's experience. And it likely is also correlated to walking on eggshells and being around unpredictable people, people who were unreliable emotionally, who were not attuned to you, who didn't meet your needs. It was about them. It could be that you grew up with a narcissist, an abuser, an addict, someone with a chronic illness. There could be so many reasons. Maybe you had to take care of your little brothers and sisters. Maybe you had an alcoholic parent who was prone to eruptions. And so you thought, man, if they're good, I'm good. And so if everyone else is good, then I'm safe. And so if we can actually come to the owning of the reality that every relationship we're in, we're agreeing to be in, and we're agreeing to the dynamics of those relationships. And if we have resentment, or we notice that we're in this pattern where we get burnt out and exhausted because everyone comes to us for help and we say yes to helping people move when no one likes doing that, but I get it. We do say yes to it sometimes because of, resources and all the things, but we say yes to things that we don't actually have the capacity for. And then you recognize when you start to get access to the word no, you realize that your capacity was way further back. So the shadow side of goodness is that it actually robs you of the ability to create authentic relationships. And it also doesn't allow the other person you're in relationship with to learn how to show up for themselves. Now, of course, in relationships, it is about compromise, give and take, and learning how to be there for one another, to be able to depend on one another. So we go from codependency, self-abandonment, to interdependency. But listen to this. Interdependency requires independence, in that it requires two selves. When there is self-abandonment going on and the identity that I need to fix, help, support, take care of everybody else, and the other person is, I need to have problems to solve, there's something wrong with me, I always have to have an issue to keep people close. Neither of those people get to be free in their relational experience. So this is part one. The next part of this series on the shadow side of goodness, I'm going to explore the shadow side collectively of goodness and how that has shown up in our society. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you share this episode with somebody that you think would really benefit from it. And if you're in a relationship with someone who tends to be more on that kind spectrum where you can see that self-abandonment and that they don't have any energy for themselves, that there's a gentle way to share this, to say, I see how much you give. And I just want to be mindful that sometimes I think that you give beyond your capacity, and it's because you want everyone else to be okay. And sometimes I notice that you're not okay. And I want you to know that I want to be here for you so that you are okay. Can we talk about these dynamics? Are you open to that? So with all that said, hit me up in the comments, share, what did this bring forward for you? What awarenesses do you now have about these dynamics? And what can you do to help support in changing these dynamics with other people, no matter what side you are on of those relationship experiences? Much love.